Sorry, recalibrate. Okay, so thank you for being here. And I'm Erin Roach. I am the Vermont Director of First Children's Finance. Our mission is to grow the supply and business sustainability of excellent childcare. Today, I am presenting the results of our second annual State of Vermont's Childcare Business Sector Survey. You will also find some other data sprinkled in here because I love data. If you know me, you know I love data. So we're going to run through this efficiently. I will try to speak slowly enough, but I get a little excited sometimes. So first of all, I have a little introduction about First Children's Finance in Vermont, and more generally, First Children's Finance. So since we're new here in Vermont, we've only been here just over a year, a little reminder of what we do. First Children's Finance is a national nonprofit. We're based in Minnesota. The Vermont State Office is our fourth state office, and we are in the process of opening our fifth state office. Reach out to me afterwards if you want more information about where our fifth state office is. I'd be happy to talk more about that. What we do in a nutshell, like I said, our mission is to grow the supply and business sustainability of excellent childcare. In Vermont, particularly, we are really focused on working with childcare businesses, and says here, we partner with childcare businesses to strengthen their operations and achieve their dreams at every step of the way. And that really is what we do. We also, in other states particularly, we work on public systems and systems change, and we work with communities to help them address issues of childcare supply and demand. So in Vermont, we are providing professional development, we're providing consulting and technical assistance. We're also providing access to capital. Over the last year, we have added products and services in all of these categories, all of them, professional development, consulting, technical assistance, and access to capital are all designed to support that mission of growing the supply and business sustainability of excellent childcare. And just a little fun note about what we've done in our first year, because we are really proud of what we have accomplished so far. It's been kind of a wild year. If you're following childcare in Vermont at all, you know it's been a wild year. So starting last April 2023, we've led 26 trainings that had 244 participants. We have conducted 4 business leadership cohorts that included 59 participants in those. We've conducted 2 annual surveys of childcare businesses and 1 survey last summer about flood relief and flooding damage that childcare businesses might have experienced. We also currently are working with 7 childcare businesses as consulting clients. We are working with them on an ongoing basis to address a particular goal that they have. And lastly, we have awarded $1.9 million. I am rounding a little bit. It's like 1.89 or something. $1.9 million in grants to 64 programs. And I just updated that this morning because we awarded 2 more grants last week. So 64 programs. This is expected to yield about 1,400 spaces and 278 new jobs in 14 counties. That 1,400 is 708 new spaces, 287 expanded spaces, and 405 preserved spaces. And it also includes 19 new family childcare homes, which we are particularly proud of. If you follow the industry, you know that family childcare homes have been in decline over the last number of years. And so we're really proud to be helping kind of renew growth in that sector. So I'll tell you a little bit about who did the survey, and then share with you kind of some overarching conclusions from the survey data, and then we'll get into the survey data itself. All right, first of all, I did a little comparison. We had 111 people take the survey in total. And I did a little comparison to the number of regulated programs and the types of regulated programs and their presence in our survey respondents. You can see that in the green box on the left-hand side. And then I also compared it to the number of regulated programs by county. And so you can see the responses by county and the percent of total regulated childcares who in each county that are represented in the survey. You can see it's in some counties we're a little overrepresented and in others we're a little underrepresented. Generally, it follows along with the proportion of programs in that space. A little bit more about who completed the survey. So demographically, 5% of the respondents identified as something other than white. These were either Hispanic, Native American, or they identified as 2 or more races. 1% said that they prefer the Spanish over English, their primary language. 2% identified as male. And then looking more at the businesses themselves, about half are family child who did the survey are family childcare, 46% are licensed centers, and 5% are after-school programs only. 30% of these programs were either based in Chittenden or Addison County. 52% own the building or the home that they work out of. And this is the most interesting, I think, on this slide. 32%, about a third, have been in business for 31 or more years. On the other hand, 28% said that they've opened in the past 5 years. And so you can see that really a third of them have been in business a really long time. Almost a third of them have been in business a very short time. And then the other third are somewhere in the middle, right? Somewhere between 5 and 30 years. And then the last point to note is that 2/3 of them are for-profit businesses. That includes all family childcares. And so the conclusions that I drew, I always feel like it's helpful to state these conclusions right up front so that when you see the data, you have something to put it in context of. So the conclusions that I draw: Vermont childcare businesses are generally more optimistic, but still pretty concerned than they were last year. And compared to, well, in this case, we compared them to one other state where we did this survey, which is Minnesota. And you'll see some of those results as we get more into this presentation. Number 2, family childcares, who generally experience larger increases in reimbursement rates as a result of Act 76, seem to be more stable and more optimistic for the future than the childcare centers or after-school programs. Costs of providing childcare increased in 2022 and 2023 due to inflation and workforce shortages, and especially they experienced this in the cost of the space that they have and their staffing, and that these businesses are really still adjusting to these higher ongoing costs. Costs appear to be stabilizing, and fewer have deferred maintenance, though funding for operations would help. And you'll see more about that in a little bit. Hiring and cost of compensation remain the single biggest challenge to their business stability. Uncertainty and disbelief remain around the impact of the CCFAP eligibility increases, and that also leads to uncertainty of their business stability. Businesses also have concerns about the future of universal pre-K. We didn't really ask too much about universal pre-K in this survey, but it definitely came up in the form of comments. And so I felt like it was really important to acknowledge that. So those are the general conclusions from the data. And now I'm going to start to walk through the data. Okay, so the first few slides are all related to overall business stability. And in some cases, I'll compare these to data from last year. In other cases, I'll compare them to data from the state of Minnesota. And I also will share some administrative data from the state of Vermont. Okay. So in 2024, I'll just point out that in general in this presentation, the light blue bars are the family child care centers from 2024, and the light orange bars are the centers and after school programs. So we asked this question, how long do you plan to stay in business? And this year, 27% of family child cares and 46% of centers and after school programs said that they plan to stay in business indefinitely. On the other hand, 8% of family child care said they plan to stay in business just 1 or 2 years, and 2% of centers said 1 or 2 years. I point this out because last year, and in this big blue box here, I highlighted when we asked a similar question last year, 17% of all the businesses we surveyed last year said they did not expect to stay in business more than 1 year. And so seeing just 5%, and that's the 8% and the 2% combined, 5% said that they expect to stay in business less than 2 years this year. That's a big change. And that is a big reason that I have started to conclude that people are more optimistic for the future of childcare in Vermont. Okay, so I took that and I was curious, well, in Vermont, we've made these big investments through Act 76. How does Vermont compare to Minnesota that has made some good investments, but not the kind of historic change that we've seen in Vermont? So what you can see is that family childcare, this is Vermont family childcare, and then Minnesota, and then Vermont childcare centers and after school, and then Minnesota centers. Minnesota does not include after school programs in their survey. You can see here that in Vermont, a higher percentage of family childcares expect to stay in business indefinitely compared to in Minnesota. So that's interesting. In centers, it's a little bit lower in Vermont than in Minnesota. The other thing that you can see is that this green bar, which is the percent that said unsure, is much bigger in Vermont than in Minnesota. And so we believe, based on the other results of this study, we believe some portion of these unsures are these people, like I said, who are sort of in disbelief or sort of wondering about the future. They're waiting to see what the real impact of Act 76 will be. And so they're not ready to say we expect to be in business indefinitely. They are unsure. They're waiting to see how this will all sort of shake out. I also brought this data from the state of Vermont. This is the number of regulated programs by program type. The blue line is the number of family child cares, the green line is the number of centers, and the orange line is the number of after-school programs. We've started tracking this, the number of programs in the state on a quarterly basis. We started this a year ago when we basically when we opened the office, we started keeping track of this. And so I brought this today because I think it's another example of that sort of optimism coupled with uncertainty, right? Because for the first time ever, or since we've been doing this in this year, you can see that in this quarter, the number of programs ticked up from the previous quarter. And that really, in terms of the, there's a little bit of a difference in after school. And we think that has to do with the sort of school nature of those programs. But in general, we haven't seen a quarter over quarter more programs. We have only seen just either staying the same or a slight decline in programs. And so I just wanted to bring that today. I think it's relevant to this survey data, and it's March 2024 is the same time frame that we were conducting the survey. I thought that was helpful context for everyone. And we are, of course, optimistic that these numbers will continue to climb. All right. So that's the overall sort of business stability story in the data. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about enrollment and about revenue more generally. Keep in mind that enrollment and its accompanying tuition is the primary means that childcare businesses bring in revenue, bring in income. We'll talk a little bit about some other revenue sources for them, but that's why I have enrollment and revenue together. This is really the income stream for these childcare businesses. Okay, so this slide is a little bit different. In this slide, I'm comparing 2023 and 2024. So 2023 is the top bar, and then 2024. So we asked in both years, we asked them in the past year, has your enrollment increased, decreased, or stayed the same or been stable? And so these are the results 2023 compared to 2024. And I thought this was a really important data point to share with you all because we talk a lot about how there's not enough childcare out there and there is a shortage of childcare and how we're going to build more childcare. A message that we don't often talk about is childcares aren't always fully enrolled, and that when their enrollment decreases, it can be a really unstabilizing factor for a business, right? Because like I said, that is their source of revenue. And the more predictable that revenue is, even if it's not as high as they want, the more predictable it is, the better they can plan and the more stable they can be. And so seeing that fewer programs, a lower percentage of family childcares and of centers and after school programs describe that their enrollment decreased in the previous year, right? So 2023, we asked them to reflect back on 2022. In 2024, we asked them to reflect back on 2023. So this is another optimistic moment in the survey data that we see. I also want to call your attention to this green box here, and you'll see these boxes are in different colors on different slides. These all are a quote from someone who took the survey, a sort of open-ended comment that they shared with us. And I thought that they were, these ones I picked because I thought they were powerful and reflective of other comments that we've seen. So talking about the recovery back from COVID. All right. The next two slides are showing licensed capacity according to the childcare business themselves. We have not verified this with BFIS or the state, compared to how many they have enrolled and how many they want to have enrolled. And this slide is childcare centers and after-school programs. The next slide is just family childcare. And I'll show you. So this is interesting. The orange line, the dot that is here, represents how many they would like to have enrolled in their program, whereas the blue bar is how many they currently have enrolled, and the green is how many they're licensed to enroll. It's not surprising that there's always some green up at the top. We advise programs to budget for 10 or 15% vacancy at any given time. So it makes sense that they all have at least a little bit of green at the top. But looking at these childcare centers and after-school programs, you can see this orange line is just above or just at what they have enrolled, meaning that they have reached sort of their maximum desired capacity, right? When you have the orange bar right there at the top of the blue bar, that means the number that they have enrolled is about the same as the number they want enrolled. You'll see something funny happens here with preschool and school-aged, right? The preschool children, they have more children enrolled than they would really like overall, all the programs that we surveyed. Whereas the school-age, they actually say we would like to have more school-aged children in our program. Family childcare, on the other hand, is a little bit different story. You can see that the orange, the desired number of children, is always up in the green. And in fact, in preschool, it's even a little bit above the green. Meaning that these family childcares overall have some spaces they would like to enroll more children at every age. I found that, again, kind of with the decreased enrollment slide, I was a little surprised to see that. I want to, I want to temper that comment with, this is not a big number. You can see from the scale, this is 8 or 10 children out of 80 children across the state. So we're not talking about lots and lots of capacity available, but out of about 50 programs in the state, they have capacity for just about 80 children, 80 infants, and they currently have about, looks like 62 infants. So, and they would like to have about 78, something like that. So you can see that it's not a lot of capacity, but it is a little bit of capacity. And again, there's a blue box here with a quote talking about universal pre-K and some concerns about what that will mean for their enrollment. All right. For childcare, tuition might be the main revenue driver, but it's not the only source of revenue or income, right? There were grants available last year in a variety of ways. Well, another thing they can do for revenue, rather than enroll more children, is that they can raise their tuition or lower their tuition. And so again, the blue bar are family childcare and the orange bar is centers and after school. Another way they can increase their income is through high interest financing, such as like credit cards or payday loans. And you can see some family childcares are having to resort to those things. Not a lot, but a few. And you can also see a little further down, some centers are opening new classrooms as another way to increase revenue and serve more children. But as I've said throughout the presentation, in this green box, this quote, we still don't know how much additional income we'll get from Act 76, right? So even though they're optimistic, they're a little uncertain about what it will mean. And the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit more about tuition rates, so I'm not going to dwell on that for now. So the pie on the left are family childcare homes and what they said they've done with their tuition rates in what they plan to do for 2024. And the pie on the right are childcare centers and after-school programs. At the bottom in these orange bars, this is the percent from the previous slide. 41% of family childcare homes raised their tuition in 2023, last year. 78% of centers raised their tuition. So just keep that in mind as you look at this pie, where you can see about a third, maybe a little bit more than a third of family childcares plan to raise their tuition as much as they are allowed to, right? Right now, there's a 7.2% cap on raising tuition. So a little bit more than a third, whereas centers is significantly less. It's more like a quarter of centers who plan to raise their tuition as much as they're allowed to. So we expect that it has something to do with family childcare. Homes kept their tuition, and more likely kept their tuition steady last year while Act 76 was getting implemented, whereas childcare centers maybe couldn't wait or didn't wait. And already, many of them already raised their rates. And so we think that family childcares are just kind of catching up to those. And remember, we talked earlier about increased costs. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about expenses and the costs and like how it's driven by rising costs of space and staffing. Okay, this is a pretty busy slide, but there's a lot here. So 2023, which is over here on the right, or no, these are centers and after school on the right, and family childcare is here on the left. And the darker blue is last year, and the lighter blue is this year. So you can see that more programs, virtually all programs, are paying their rent or mortgage on time. And virtually all of them are paying all their other bills on time too. So that's great. And it's a little bit better for family childcares. Well, and it's a little better for centers and after-school programs as well. Another note is that last year, 5 people said that they were behind on their rent or mortgage, and this year it was just 1. So that feels important to note. Other things that people do to sort of keep their business stable as far as managing expenses is deferring maintenance or taking less income for themselves is another way they helps their business stay in business. And you can see that in general, there was less of that, less deferred maintenance this year compared to last year, less households income affected by their childcare business losses. Little bit of an increase in deferred maintenance in the centers and after school programs, but pretty close to the same. So that's mostly good news. It is still 40%, 62%, right? It's not nothing. And 43% of family childcares this year said their household income was impacted by childcare business losses. So I mentioned that because we're not out of the woods yet, right? It's a mixed story. This year, we asked also about insurance. We've heard a lot of concern about insurance and liability insurance and programs' ability to afford it and programs' ability to obtain it. And so we asked some questions about that. And I think that this slide helps illustrate how much harder it is for family child cares to get liability insurance. Remember, they're the blue bar, and how worried they are about getting insurance. Most centers and after school programs, 80% of them are not concerned about it. Whereas 30% of family child cares are worried about not being able to obtain enough coverage. And a small percent, about 16%, are worried about losing their coverage. So helpful to understand that family child cares really do have different business concerns than child care centers. And then the other thing that is on everybody's minds, I think, in childcare is hiring and staffing. So the good news is that last year, 96% said it was very or somewhat difficult to hire. And this year, it was just under 80%. So that's a big improvement. However, 80% saying hiring is difficult is still problematic. And you can see concerns raised by one of the respondents in that blue box. I'll call your attention here to hiring this year. More of them said that they're either not hiring or that it's neither difficult nor easy. It's somewhere in the middle. So it makes me think that the workforce is stabilizing, maybe not at the level it needs to be at, but that maybe we're seeing a little less turnover than we've seen in the previous year. That may be in part due to programs really stepping up the benefits that they're offering as sort of a full compensation package. You can see here that 80%, just about 80% of programs gave raises to people in 2023. And for 40% of them, that was a new thing in last year. Also retention bonuses, paid time off, 75%, a little more than 75% gave paid time off last year. So they are really one of the ways that they are using the increased reimbursement rates and the expectation of more CCFAP eligibility is by giving better compensation packages to their workforce. A little bit more about how childcare businesses have been managing their expenses. We talked a little about a household income being affected. You can see here, some people are still not able to pay themselves all the time. A few people are reducing their business expenses. A few people closed a classroom, not very many. What gives me some that optimism is that family child care, 1 in 5 family child care said that they added money to their savings or retirement. That is something we haven't really seen before. And then at the bottom, 10% of centers and after school programs said that they added to their business emergency fund. So those both feel like really positive changes that happened last year. And you can see the comment here talks about operating costs continuing to increase. Not surprising given inflation over the last couple of years. All right. We asked them some questions about that are sort of about their perceptions and what they thought they needed. So these are the results of that. I took the opportunity to compare. So Vermont is in the lighter bars, the blue and the orange family child care centers. The darker bars are the results from Minnesota. I thought it was helpful to put the Vermont percents in context of what another state looked like. So you can see that most of the people surveyed agree that the state of Vermont is making investments to increase subsidy rates. Most of the respondents are willing to accept CCFAP, financial assistance from the state. A little less, but still most people agree that the state is investing in childcare facilities. What's really interesting here is that Minnesota actually has a facilities revitalization grant program. So this is a little surprising to me that that Vermont childcare businesses are more likely to agree, more of them agree that Vermont's investing in childcare facilities. They also agree that the state is making investments that increase sustainability of childcare. And then I'll skip to the other side of the chart. Most of them are optimistic about the future of their business. And most of them agree that compensation is increasing. However, most of them also agree that the childcare sector is in crisis. So, right, again, there's a lot of optimism out there and a lot of sort of hope, but there is also the kind of disbelief and concern that that we're not there yet, and they are still worried about their business. Even though they're optimistic, they don't quite know where this is going to end up. As this one person said, I am concerned that I will not see more families become eligible even in October. Right? They just don't know. And we asked them what would help keep their business financially viable this year. We compared that to last year. The last year, more than half of the people said we need more grants and more funding. This year, only about 20% said that they need more grants and more funding. And I appreciate how many people said continue the current funding and make more families eligible for financial assistance, right? Instead of saying we need more grants and funding, they talk more about continuing funding. So that's kind of exciting, right? And also last year, they talked about needing higher tuition and higher CCFAP. And this year, they're really talking about needing more families to be eligible for those things. So things really are changing, and they're being noticed. All right. Let's see what time it is. Okay, we're doing okay. I have one, maybe two more slides, and then I will investigate if there's any questions or how we're going to go about taking questions. I'm happy to answer questions. So from all of this, I have sort of gleaned on behalf of the First Children's Finance Vermont office, I have gleaned these 5 trends in childcare in Vermont. And I think I've talked about all of these, or nearly all of these things. One is I've talked about optimism for the future. I'm going to go to the bottom. I've talked about staffing challenges. I've talked about increased costs of operation. The other 2 trends we haven't really talked about here, but it's something that we're definitely seeing. And even though it's not directly from the results of this survey, we're seeing more interest in ownership transitions, either on the I'd like to sell my business or on the I'd like to buy somebody else's business. So that's exciting to see more interest on both sides of that. And then lastly, we're seeing more employers, particularly large employers and other sorts of businesses outside of childcare that are really trying to address their own staffing challenges trying to take a more active role in making sure that there is childcare for their employees. And that looks a variety of ways. But it's exciting to see that that more particularly large employers are trying to address this. So those are all things that are kind of guiding our work for the coming year, right? I talked at the beginning a little about the work that we did in the first year. So so the last thing I'll leave you with are some of the things that we're planning for this year. And we're pretty excited. Right, we're going to keep doing all the same things we've been doing for the past year. We're going to continue providing access to capital through capacity building grants. And in the fall, we're going to be adding some lending opportunities. It's been a long time coming, and we're really excited about that. And we're also going to focus more on support for particularly startups, but also large expansions. And so we'll be offering some business planning programming, and as well as, like I said, there'll be some lending capital available. We'll also, towards the end of the year, we're going to look at working a little bit more closely with communities. And we also will be developing some offerings that will help with succession planning and ownership transitions. So I just wanted to leave you with that. And that's the end. That's who we are. I go to the Q&A. I can maybe stop sharing my screen. Okay. Stop sharing my screen. Questions? Oh, sorry, Matt. Have any information about whether the staffing ratio requirements for various ages of kids affect whether programs want more children at those age ranges? That's a great question. So we asked people for their licensed capacity, and we asked them what they had enrolled, and then we asked them how many children they would like to have enrolled. We assume that when they talk about how many they'd like to have enrolled, that they are providing that within the context of how many children they're allowed to have enrolled at those at their staffing. There definitely are programs we know that if they could hire more people would love to expand. And we've seen a few people opening classrooms this past year with some optimism for being able to hire staff. And I think the jury's still a little out on that. Anyway, if you have other questions, you could raise your hand or put them in the Q&A. I'll just pause for a moment. Anyway, I hope that this is helpful and provides you some insight into the work that you're doing and kind of what childcare businesses, where they're at right now, and how they're thinking about their business. Also, a little how they're thinking about Act 76 and what it means to them, what it will mean to them in the future. And yeah, we are really optimistic about what can happen this year. And we're excited to keep doing this work. I think this time last year, or when we did this survey and this presentation, it was March and April last year, and I had no idea that Act 76 was coming in April last year. And so it was really hard to make this presentation because so many people in this same survey last year said, we just want the ARPA stabilization grants to continue. That's really all we want. And I knew that those were over. And so that was a really hard moment. And so this moment feels a lot more exciting, like things could really change for the better. With that, not hearing more questions, I am going to thank you for your time, and I'm going to stop recording.